Esaw Garner's widow has been very vocal about her husband's death since the very beginning, and she spoke with our Dominic Carter in D.C. today about the case and why she is calling for change.
Mrs. Garner, a big day here in Washington. How do you feel?
Well, I was okay last night, but I guess seeing the outpour of love and support, you know, for not only my husband, but for all the young men that have been victims of this police brutality, my emotions are starting to well up on me now. So I'm just trying to keep it cool so I don't break down, you know.
What is your message to the public?
Justice for my husband. Be held accountable for what you did. You know, you want to apologize, but you're not sorry. You have no remorse. You feel like what you did was right. You feel like what you did was okay. So I always have a saying, you can't repent and repeat. And he's repeated this a couple of times. It's not the first time.
My final question, thousands of people are here today from all over America to support you. Describe what that feels like.
It's overwhelming. I knew my husband was loved by a lot of people, myself, my children, my family, but I never in a million years thought that I would get so much love and support from the nation.
Why is your voice cracking?
Because I'm about to cry.
It's an emotional day.
Counselor?
Yeah.
What is this day all about?
This is a day about accountability and transparency in the criminal justice process. It's about saying no to grand juries that don't indict, to prosecutors who don't get involved, who don't do the right thing and get indictments in these kind of cases. It's about saying enough is enough. Esaw Garner, before he died, had his hands up and he was saying enough is enough. He's a metaphor for this whole movement.
This stops today.
It stops today. And what we say today is that this stops today.
Counselor? Yeah. How do you feel here in D.C. today? Lots of people here. You're on the front line with the Garner family.
Black life matters, all life matters. That is the message. We all count in God's eyes, and we're all Americans.
Yeah, finally, Mrs. Garner, you're now a public figure, whether you want to be or not. People recognize you all across America. How tough is this struggle for you?
It's tough. Sometimes I don't even want to come out my house. I can't go to the supermarket. I can't go anywhere without, not that I don't appreciate the condolences, but for the cause, but the action itself is what makes me, you know, feel sad and everything, because he didn't deserve to die like that.
Now this week, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, in the aftermath of these cases, and again, as I said, with a case that will be coming up in Brooklyn, he spoke, as many have here, maybe there's a different way to do this in terms of prosecute these cases. And the AG, he asked Governor Cuomo for jurisdiction over all police killings of unarmed civilians as opposed to giving local prosecutors jurisdiction over the cases.
When the trust between the police and the communities they serve and protect breaks down, everyone is at risk. Many, including some of my colleagues here, have suggested that there is an inherent conflict when local district attorneys who work with police departments every day are asked to investigate members of those departments.
Now, as you wouldn't be too surprised, not everybody sees it the same way, including the Kings County DA, Ken Thompson. The Brooklyn district attorney, he says no. He released a statement saying the following: local prosecutors who were elected to enforce the laws in those communities should not be robbed of their ability to faithfully and fairly do so. And Mayo, you're a former prosecutor. Who is the best person to conduct this in Staten Island? The same argument could be made by Donovan when he said, listen, I was elected by the people of Richmond County to conduct this case here. Then people said, well, time out, he might have a conflict of interest. Brooklyn DA says, no, I don't. I know the people I represent. Should this be kicked to the AG? Should there be independent prosecutors appointed? And who decides? Where's the line here? For example, in the case in the synagogue where we saw the stabbing and then the shooting, nobody's calling for an independent investigation. So who's Solomon here to decide which case is warranted and which ones don't?
Well, I think, again, the case in the synagogue probably doesn't become a case. It's a police action, but it's not in all likelihood a criminal police action, so no one's going to be prosecuting that case. When you look at other cases, you either need the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, Federal Department of Justice, or you can create a standing body which could act as an Inspector General for police shootings. But I think it even should go beyond that. It should be for all police misconduct, because the reality is all of our elected officials, all of our elected prosecutors, district attorneys in the state have unique relationships with law enforcement. They're going to be working with police officers each and every day. They put cases into grand jury with these police officers. So it's, in theory, if you have an officer who shoots and kills someone and it's a questionable shooting, or uses excessive force, even on a case where the person's not dead but the person has a jaw broken, has an injury that's unwarranted, the district attorney's office is less likely to be able to successfully prosecute that case than if they were prosecuting someone else, because they're also possibly going to be calling that exact same officer to testify in that same grand jury. I just want to say also, look, in the district attorney's office, if somebody who is a relative of an employee at the DA's office gets arrested, there's an independent prosecutor. If an assistant district attorney gets arrested, it's an independent prosecutor. Nobody ever suggests there that that DA could still prosecute family members and friends and their own employees. So there are different levels of independent prosecutors. You could designate me as an independent prosecutor. Well, I don't think that's what should happen. You need a standing body.
Let's put it in the case of Esaw Garner's case. As people at home probably know, 2 rookie officers, and I know they're trying to change that policy now, but 2 rookie officers are doing, are going into in the projects, doing I guess a vertical patrol. Vertical patrol. Thank you, Chief. And nobody debates here. Mr. Gurley just walked out to go down a stairwell. The elevator wasn't working, dimly littered hall, and a rookie police officer shot and killed him. There's some debate as to the order and the sequence of the calls that happened after that, the investigational clues. But who should prosecute this case? You've been on, the police side of this. Is the DA the best person? Should this go to the Attorney General? What do you think?
Well, I think there's pros and cons on both sides. Certainly, I know Ken Thompson well, and I would expect him and every district attorney to say, I was elected and that's my responsibility. I certainly understand the Attorney General's position too, and I know him well. But the question I would ask is that, what do you think the people would prefer in that situation? If it could go to some type of referendum, I think the majority of the people would vote for an independent body. Now, that's not to suggest that the Attorney General could do a more effective job than either Dan Donovan or Ken Thompson or Cyrus Vance. I think it comes to an area of perception. How do you feel? Because I think if the independent body came out with the same verdict, people might be a little more willing to accept it because of that sense of independence.
I also think the key word was transparency also that we heard from the Garner family and also their counsel is we still don't know how the case was presented in Staten Island. What do you think, Pastor?
I think that in the progression of action, you have a vision or a mission, you have the goals, the objectives. And where it becomes muddy for me is the language that we're using prior to the action. Language like transparency, language like justice, that's impressive language, but it's not always clearly defining what the measurable outcome is intended to produce. And so I get confused sometimes, particularly at the suggestion that we, the people, will determine who is going to step in those moments and provide us with what we think is fair or transparent or just. Because anytime you're going to bring people, a body in, you run the risk that it won't be fair, it won't be just, and it won't be transparent. But again, we try to do the best we can.
And I think people, when we have this conversation, I don't know what the answer is either. I think you laid it out. There's a menu. Imagine now it's in different communities than the ones that we even talked about. You want to think about in Rockland County in certain areas? Do you imagine if some of the conflicts that might be there for the district attorney if he was prosecuting a case, let's say at New Square or wherever else, and then if the state came in, some of the conflict would be. So this is a tricky question here, but I think it's the key one, especially if people are going to believe in the system going forward. All right, when we come back, film director Spike Lee and his daughter, they speak exclusively to RFL about why they were in Washington today and what the rally means to them. We'll be right back.